on YouTube. And this is getting recorded as well, so take it away. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's listening session on the transitional shelter site at Juniper Ridge. We appreciate you taking time to be here today to share your valuable input with us. My name is Michaela Oliver. I'm the Community Relations Manager with the City of Bend, and I act as the liaison for neighborhood associations and the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance. I'll be moderating today's session, and I would like to run through some of the guidelines for everyone attending. On the screen, you should see a few bullet points. You will be on mute when you first join the meeting. Please make sure that your microphone or phone stays muted while others are speaking. The meeting host will also monitor microphones. There will be time for questions and comments after staff update you on the feasibility of a temporary transitional shelter site at Juniper Ridge. Instructions to ask questions or provide comments will be provided later on when we get to that part of the meeting. And this listening session will be recorded for public viewing after the meeting, so please be mindful that you are being recorded today. On the screen, you should now see, if you are in need of closed captions, the instructions to get those to start showing. So when closed captioning begins, you'll see a notification above the closed caption in the meeting controls. If you clicked closed caption to start viewing, you can click and drag the closed captioning to move its position in the meeting window. If you have questions about that, please feel free to just send us a message in the chat and we'll help you out. So we have a simple format today as we want to ensure our attendees have the floor for the majority of the session. We're going to start off with an update from city staff on feasibility, as I said. Then we'll have time for you to ask questions and comments. We have a hard stop today at 7:30 p.m. So when you do get to the comment portion, please be mindful of your time. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Today we have John Skidmore, Chief Operations Officer, Carolyn Egan, Economic Development Director, Sergeant Liz Lawrence with the Bend Police Department, Jaime Gomez Beltran, our Property Manager for Juniper Ridge, Elizabeth Alshell, the Associate City Attorney, and then myself, Michaela Oliver, Community Relations Manager, as I mentioned. Big shout out to Joshua Romero, who's running tech right now, and Kayla Deddy, who will be recording notes as we go through this meeting. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to John.
Great, and Carolyn, Egan, and myself will be really providing the majority of the staff update. We've got a good amount of information to get to, and I know we have a number of folks who would like to comment. So we're going to try to get through this quickly. So Joshua, if you could move on to the next slide. Carolyn, I know you were going to address this slide, so please go ahead.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks, John. Again, I'm Carolyn Egan. I serve as the city's Economic Development Director. And as we think about the feasibility of the temporary transitional housing site at Juniper Ridge, I really wanted to talk just a little bit about who in our community is experiencing homelessness. We have received hundreds of comments from across the community, and definitely wanted to just take a moment and ground truth a little bit about what is happening around homelessness and why this population it tells us how we need to create bridges so that we can help people move from homelessness into stable housing. So we did a point in time count, which is basically a one-night count of homelessness back in January. And back in January, we found 1,000 people in Bend or in Central Oregon who were experiencing homelessness. And we know that that is a really significant undercount. That wouldn't count people who are staying at friends' houses or who maybe couch surfing or others who we wouldn't find in the count. But when we did that, we found that we had a large number of children who were experiencing homelessness. The stat that really struck me was those who are youth and are homeless without an adult. And this was a 10% increase from what we saw in 2019. Again, I said this was January of 2020 when we counted. We know that the situation has changed dramatically. The housing prices have changed, increased significantly. throughout Central Oregon, and definitely the impact of the pandemic has impacted many families. And so if it feels like there are more community members experiencing homelessness throughout Bend and all of our region, there are more individuals and families, and we are bracing for that situation to worsen. So you're probably familiar with that. We have eviction and foreclosure moratoriums in place in Oregon right now. Those are set to expire unless the legislature extends them. And we may have hundreds more families who are experiencing homelessness in our community if and when those moratoriums expire. So as we think about the reasons that we're looking for solutions or looking for ways to address this issue, it is because the situation has worsened and is worsening right before our eyes.
Great, thank you. Next slide, Joshua, please. So this is a how did we get here slide. So Carolyn mentioned the increase in number of people in our community experiencing homelessness. And back on October 21st, staff spoke with council about a variety of issues occurring out at Juniper Ridge, and I'll just briefly run through them. First, we have the North Interceptor construction, which is a large sewer project that is being constructed through Juniper Ridge. And there's a map below here that after the slide that shows the alignment, but there was a large population of camps in proximity to the construction project. And so we went through a very involved public process to be able to move the campsites and the campers off of that property, pretty much the entirety of Juniper Ridge within the city limits, which is about 500 acres. We needed to create a construction zone so that we had a safe area for the contractors to work. We're digging 30, 40 foot deep trenches. We've got rock crushing operations. We've got heavy trucks. It's just not safe for campers or other users to be out there. So we went through a process to move those campers. A lot of those campers moved north onto the north portion of Juniper Ridge, which we can provide a little additional context in a moment as well. And what we saw from that concentration was that we increased some fire risk. We already have some fire risk out at Juniper Ridge, pretty significant based on the fuel types, based on the lack of good access in and out of Juniper Ridge. So it creates issues for both responders as well as the campers. And then we've got a number of camps out there who have warming and cooking fires, which only adds to that risk. And we saw that really manifest with the August 15th fire that we were very lucky we were able to control. And there was as little loss as there was. And we're very lucky not to have lost any life through that process. But we have an obligation to address that better. And we also have the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad that runs through Juniper Ridge. We have 2 licensed crossings over that railroad, which the city just doesn't have the ability to cross wherever they want. Burlington Northern Santa Fe, BNSF, has provided us 2 licenses. And there were 2 incidents this summer that got their attention, and BNSF got in touch with the city. First, we had an RV that got high centered on the railroad crossing. A train hit the RV. Luckily, nobody was in it, but BNSF contacted us about that afterwards, asking us how we were managing our crossings. And then we had the fire. And again, we got another call from BNSF, and their first, approach to the conversation was, we want to talk about revoking your licenses for that crossing, which is not something that as the property owner is acceptable to us. We need access to the northeast portion of Juniper Ridge. Those crossings provide that access. We have an obligation to manage those sites better. And as a result, what we talked with BNSF about was us putting in swingable, lockable gates so that we control that access. But we can't put those gates in and lock them if we have campers behind them. That's obviously, I don't know if it's illegal, but it's at the very least very unethical that we can't lock people behind a gate who are living there. So we started talking through some ideas to help manage that property, and we have legal issues that are really being decided through various case law. And the rule is we can't move campers off of public property unless there are areas within our community that those experiencing homelessness can legally sleep and aren't in fear of a citation. So as we were trying to figure out how to better manage that property and protect those licenses, there was a city manager order to address COVID, and council ratified that. Section 18 of that emergency order provides the city the ability to use city-owned property to provide some shelters to help those who are experiencing homelessness. So the general strategy was to create this managed camp in Juniper Ridge that would provide the area where the folks behind those locked gates could move to, so we could put up those gates and better manage our access points and our license crossings. So with that, next slide, please. So we'll provide a little context. In Juniper Ridge on the left, you see a map. You can see that that's the area that's in light orange is within the city's urban growth boundary in the city limits. You can see at 18th and Cooley, that's the Les Schwab headquarters. If you head up 18th a little bit, that is the Sutera site. On the left, you can see Highway 97, as well as the BNSF railroad that kind of parallels that. On the right is the larger Juniper Ridge property, which is the 500 acres within the city limits, plus the 1,000 acres to the north and a little bit to the east of the portion that's within city limits. So just providing a little bit of context of the scale of Juniper Ridge.
And John, I think one important point, because I'm sure many of the people who are watching us right now are neighbors. And one of the big pieces of criticism we got is, why did you not talk to the neighborhoods first?
Okay.
And I think this is an important point, and definitely an important point of criticism. And I want to be clear. So if you were a private property owner and I, as the economic development director, wanted to negotiate with you about your property to do anything, put an addition on your home, whatever it is, we can do that. As staff, we can talk to private property owners. In this case, the owner of Juniper Ridge is the city, and therefore the Bend City Council. And so the reason that our first request about looking at a site at Juniper Ridge to site the temporary transitional housing site was because the city council is the property owner. We didn't have a business or other property owner to go talk to. And so it did feel out of order for many of you. It felt out of order even for us as staff. But that is the reason that we spoke to council first, asked for permission to look at the site, and then started talking more about the concerns and the ways that this may address some of what our community is experiencing. So thanks, John.
No, thanks for the clarification. Yeah, we needed authorization from the owner before we started exploring some opportunities.
Yeah.
So this map shows the line in the red line with the kind of the pink that accompanies it. That's the alignment for the North Interceptor. Thank you. Running from east to west. So that's the construction that's underway. And prior to starting the construction, you can see these little black dots with blue. Those are actually tents in there. Those were the number of camps that were in that lower portion of Juniper Ridge that were really not in a safe location for us to start the construction of the North Interceptor. So we went through that very lengthy public process to move folks off of this property. And if you can show that portion of the property, if you can show the next slide, as you can see, there was a big concentration of folks who moved their camps north. And I explained some of the challenges we had with BNSF and fire resulting from that concentration. And so that was really the impetus coming back to council, going to council on 21st to talk through some of these options. Next slide, please. So what was council's direction on the 21st? The direction was for staff to pursue the temporary transition site, shelter site at Juniper Ridge. So doing a feasibility analysis. Is it feasible to do this? Do we have the social services that we need? Do we have the social service providers as partners in this? What are the sanitary facilities that we need? What are the costs? What are the timelines? So with any proposal, you need to look at the feasibility of it, and that's what staff has been doing since late October. Carolyn, do you want to talk quickly about the city-led task force that we were provided direction to follow up with?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we realized is that we need some capacity building and just more information from our social service and medical providers about how the city and the county, truthfully, can be more engaged in helping address homelessness. And so this city council has agreed, and the for the city manager to create a task force and really a strike team. So the goal here is that these will be high level social service professionals who have budget authority within their organization, who understand all the funding streams and understand all the services that need to be provided, and provide guidance and recommendations to the city manager. And we're working so that those recommendations would also go to the county administrator and perhaps other city managers throughout Deschutes County. So we have a regional, or at least a countywide approach. And we hope to have that committee formed at the beginning of next year so we can start moving on additional recommendations on how we can bring more funds and better services into our community to help address this issue.
Great, thank you. And then the third point of direction from council was they really indicated an interest in having a longer term homeless action plan as part of their 2021-2023 goal setting process. And with the new members of the council being sworn in January, the new council will consider if they want to move in that direction with their goal setting. So next slide, please. So feasibility, what did we look at in terms of the feasibility? Well, the partnerships, what services can social service agencies provide? What is their level, what's their responsibility? What's their role? Which different organizations are going to provide different services? And we need to document all this and get them into contracts that are signed prior to moving forward with any shelter site. We need to have those assurances that the necessary services will be provided before we start opening the doors on any type of shelter. Public safety, what role does the police play? What role does the management play of the facility, and what obligation do the members of our community that are living there have to self-regulate and exhibit the types of behavior that we find acceptable and want to see out there? What are the construction costs? What are we constructing? Are we going to do a relatively low-level development in terms of camping sites? Are we doing an RV site? Are we doing something a little bit more? What are the management costs? What are the long-term management costs, and how do we pay? The city of Bend really isn't a social service provider unto itself. We're not a public health authority. We have some housing obligations, but this is something that's outside of our core services. And so figuring out the costs and how we come up with the money to provide this in the long term, that's a pretty tough question to answer. Again, back to construction. What's needed? How do we pay? Do we need bathrooms? Can we use porta potties? Can we use hand washing stations? All of these kind of hard costs. What exactly do we need to provide for the best services? A big challenge is timing. What's the North Interceptor construction timelines? When can we get in there to actually have people be in there safely? What's the timeline with the emergency order that we're working under through Section 18? What's the timeline of that? And then resources. What do we have at our disposal to help address these homelessness issues as well as housing challenges? And I think as a public agency, the one resource we do have is land. There's significant land holdings that the city of Bend holds. And my guess is that moving forward, as we continue these conversations, because I don't see our incoming council or the community not wanting to continue to have these very tough, but what are turning out to be constructive conversations about how to provide a variety of strategies to address this community concern. We have land, and that's something we can bring to the table if it makes sense. So those are all the items that we considered for this feasibility analysis. And Joshua, if you can flip to the next slide. So based on all of those items of consideration, what we started looking at was the rock crushing site that's outlined there in the black crosshatch and the shaded gray area. And we would look at that site once the rock crushing operation moved north, along with the construction of the North Interceptor. And why would we look at that site? Well, as I mentioned, we don't have a huge budget. So we don't have the opportunity to start looking at various other places in Juniper Ridge and figure out what it's going to cost us to grade it and clear it and get it ready for this type of development. So once the rock crushing operation moves north, what's left behind is a relatively level, clear site with a lot of gravel. So that was an opportunity that we thought we needed to continue to consider. That would help with creating pads. That would help with, we already have a temporary road in there. So that there was already some some infrastructure that was in place that we could capitalize on. We wouldn't need to hire another contractor to do that work. Again, back to the budget reality. There are some regulations that apply to Juniper Ridge proper, which this is just to the outside of. You can see this gray line to the west of that cross-hatched area. There are rules and regulations that are associated with the CC&Rs there that would make a homeless shelter site really difficult because of some of the design review guidelines and those types of things. So this area seemed to work very well. And then, as I mentioned, we have some temporary infrastructure that would be usable and serviceable for the needs that we had to get in and out of there, get social service providers in there, and other stakeholders that needed access as well as the campers to get in and out. Carolyn, do you have anything to add to that particular slide?
No, I think, when we talked in the beginning about, those what we know about those who are experiencing homelessness in our community, and what we know from the social service providers who are helping to connect and to connect those individuals to whatever they may need. We know that setting up locations that are close to where individuals are already camping increases our success. And we also know that finding locations where there is, as John mentioned, access to roads and access to other networks. So really trying to find a place that was still within Juniper Ridge that we could get to more easily and still make it be somewhat comfortable for those who may want to come in from the camps on the north side of Juniper Ridge. I think one of the other things is if we can find a safe place here closer to the existing road network, we do automatically reduce our fire risk. So by reducing or eliminating the number of camps that are north of the city limit that don't have good road access, and bringing individuals who are camping closer to roads, it's safer for everyone. It's safer for the adjacent neighborhoods and businesses, and it's safer for those individuals who are camping. Thanks, John.
Well, thank you. Good point. Next slide, please. So I think I'll jump to what the recommendation is. Based on a variety of factors, this site that we've been looking at really isn't feasible for this temporary transitional shelter site at this time for a variety of reasons. Primarily, it comes down to a timing issue. We are looking at relying on Section 18 of the emergency order to site this transitional temporary housing or homeless shelter site through that emergency order, which is tied to the pandemic. And so that's one issue. The other issue is we're waiting on the timing of our contractor to move that rock crushing site further north along the alignment of the North Interceptor. The contractor, in all likelihood, isn't going to be moving that rock crushing site at least until April or so, maybe a little bit later. We also have kind of a competing timeline with the emergency order. We know that vaccines were just shipped yesterday throughout the country. Not that we're anticipating everyone's going to have the vaccine within 3 months, but the series of events and realities that support this emergency order could be very different in April. And it's going to take at least a few months to prep the site, get these agreements in place and all the other items that we need for us to be able to open this. And in terms of the best efforts to be spent on siting a shelter that could open up, let's call it May or June, and this emergency order sunsets sometime in the summer, that's a lot of effort put into what's going to be a very temporary facility. And when that emergency order expires, then we have another question in terms of what do we do with the campers that are out there currently? So really what we feel and what we're recommending the council is, Carolyn and I use this analogy a lot, we're not taking our foot off the pedal, the pedal's still down to the metal. We're just turning the steering wheel and looking at some other strategies to see what the city can do to contribute to finding solutions for housing challenges and homelessness. And so what we're recommending is that we focus on the city's development code and provide more flexibility within our zoning and development code to allow a variety of facilities to be sited throughout the city based on various factors. And those factors would address the concerns we've heard in terms of access to services, security concerns, locational items, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a very public process that we're going to focus on moving forward versus relying on a temporary emergency order that could allow us to site a facility, waiting on the timing of a contractor that has a lot of work to do, and an uncertain timeline with our emergency order. We found that, you know, working through contracts is not a quick process. Everybody's kind of at various states. Everyone's got their own obligations. Turning their attention to a temporary site wasn't going to happen in the nick of time. Security issues need to be tailored for each site. We need to figure out what the obligations are of the campers. We can't overwhelm our police services with that, so we needed to think through that more. The budget issues continue to be a challenge. We would need to work with council through the budget amendment process, et cetera, to find money to work with this. And then again, this timing issue made this effort seem a bit too short in terms of the relief offered, and we can provide better long-term solutions for the community by focusing on our development code. And we're going to walk through what that process would look like in terms of the amendments. So next slide, please.
And I think, thanks, John. I think in addition to the development code, when we talked with council in October, we had a number of things underway. Many of those things have come to fruition. So House Bill 4212 allowed us to cite 2 locations for temporary transitional shelter sites. We have both St. Vincent de Paul and Veterans Village have been approved under that new state law. So we will have an additional 26 beds for individuals in our community. We have located through partners 2 places where we're allowing overnight camping, and we're for those who are living in their vehicles or who have RVs. And we hope to continue to do that. The warming shelter opened. And so we're hoping that we can keep that warming shelter open all year round. Part of that is the development code. And to be clear, our development code has a conditional use permit process whereby that's the process by which someone would have to locate a full-time shelter for temporary. So it's a temporary stay, but it's always there. So it's a full-time use. And so we're looking to find some ways to streamline our development code to provide more locations where social service partners and others could come and build some additional shelter beds. Because the real challenge that we have in Bend is that we don't have enough shelter beds. But Juniper Ridge is not off the table. So although the temporary transitional site was deemed not feasible, we continue to change. As many of you are familiar, we are making changes to the development code in Juniper Ridge, really to facilitate more business and employment uses, so more jobs up in Juniper Ridge. But as John mentioned earlier, land is going to be a big component of our success in terms of getting more shelter beds and more housing units on the ground in Bend. And so we will definitely keep looking at land in Juniper Ridge. The next phase of our approach is to consider the development and then construction, the approval and then construction of an RV park and campground. You could think of Crown Villa if you wanted to, but having that type of facility, but with subsidized or no cost or low cost spaces for individuals and families experiencing homelessness. And then we fully expect to change the zoning in Juniper Ridge that would allow for more residential development. And this would allow the city to parcel and then donate land for deed restricted affordable housing, group housing, and other services that are needed by the families that may qualify to live in those units. So one of the big pieces that's missing in our approach to housing is housing available for families who are earning 30% of the area median income or less. And so those are individuals and families who are living on like $25,000 or $27,000, $30,000 a year. And we don't have housing units. We don't have many housing units for those families. And so getting more of those units on the ground so that we have a chance for our community members to be in stable housing. So when John talked about just turning the steering wheel, I think that's what we mean. We're looking very broadly geographically throughout the city for ways to get more shelter beds on in the near term and the medium term, and then looking at longer term solutions in terms of the RV park, campground, and then more housing. One of the things that became available while we were talking about all of this was significant state funds. And so the City of Bend, along with Neighbor Impact, is making an application to the state for funds to acquire a motel and then to run that motel as a homeless shelter. So that could put another 50, 60 shelter beds on the ground in Bend, and continue to expand our resources so that we can continue to address the issue.
Yeah, and I would mention, Carolyn, that these short, medium, and long-term strategies are I guess, just in concept only. When opportunities present themselves, we're going to pursue them to see if what was a long-term strategy could very well be a short-term strategy just based on events that happen and opportunities that are available. So next slide.
And as we talk about the development code, so we know that the first thing we need to do is really get the new council to say, yes, we want these changes to the development code, and we would like the development of code to achieve this list of goals. And then we really will work with a variety of stakeholders to help us figure out exactly what those changes ought to look like. For those of you who have watched us in the past, we've done similar groups like this for vacation rentals or for the siting of the marijuana retail locations. So there are lots of controversial issues that we have worked in groups like this where we try to get as many voices around the table as we can. So we may have a public process that looks like that. It could be different, but we know that in order to really have a community supported solution and a new development code, a modern development code going forward, we're going to need a lot of voices. So if we do have a committee, there will be people on that committee, but that won't be the only way for community members to give us input. We have two standing committees, both the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance and the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. We know that we will work through them as we bring new development code to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will then hold hearings. They make recommendations on the code to the City Council. The City Council holds a variety of hearings, and then finally the City Council would adopt that new development code. That would be the first time that even the city, us as the city, could apply to ourselves to develop what we're talking about as an RV park and campground. So there's some time for us to have a whole bunch of community conversations about how as a community we're going to modernize our codes and rules and regulations so that we can help those experiencing homelessness.
And one item before we wrap it up, just so folks listening to the presentation here, Oregon's land use system is very focused on public participation. There's 19 goals and guidelines that really oversee Oregon's land use system. Goal 1 is public participation, and it's goal 1 for a reason. It's really what is held quite dearly to the process. So all of this code work that we would be looking at does have a very intentional public process where there is opportunity upon opportunity to be involved, to weigh in, provide feedback, suggest ideas and solutions, and then there's abilities to be heard at the hearings in front of the Planning Commission, hearings in front of the City Council, and there's also the opportunity to appeal such decisions. So it's by nature a very public-oriented process that allows members of the public to weigh in on and influence issues that impact our community. So with that, I think that's the end of our presentation. And what we would like to hear from the folks in this listening session is, based on this update, what comments do you have for us as we move in this new direction?
Thanks, John and Carolyn. So at this time, we're going to move to the question and comment section. Joshua will put instructions for raising your hand on the screen, but I'll run you through them right now. So for Zoom, you're going to click on participants if you're on a desktop or iPad or on your iPhone. You're going to go to participants and click raise hand. For those of you who are calling in, you are going to press *9 to raise your hand and to lower your hand after you've finished. And so what the computer is doing now is putting things in order for me. So whoever has clicked raise hand first, you will be shown in order of fastest. So I will go through these one by one. As a reminder, you have 2 minutes. And we have over 40 people that are interested in providing comment today. So if you can keep it short and sweet, we do appreciate that. So we are going to start with Lauren Johnson. You are the first hand that I see. You can unmute yourself and Joshua will get the clock started. Are you there, Lauren? Okay, it looks like we might have some problems with the audio. And so I'm going to move on to the next person. We have Mary Tyler.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Great. Thanks for the presentation. The information was so helpful. It's hard to know in little pieces and bits through all my different resources what exactly the current status is, and I appreciate your update. Great job. I have 2 comments to make. Number one, I have 3 comments actually. The first one is thank you for connecting with the community, with neighborhoods, with individuals. We're starting to really feel heard. And it is a community problem and it should be a community solution. So thank you for really networking and connecting with people. So here are my other 2 comments. Number one is I love the idea of integrating small units of the homeless into stable living areas, rather than grouping homeless, people at risk, people with that have big needs, instead of isolating them and grouping them in too large of a group, to start connecting them in the community that wants to help, that wants to be involved, that wants to engage in lifting up and supporting people and getting them to stable financial and living situations. The second one is I would love to hear about reaching out to communities who've successfully helped the homeless and networking with that professional advice. I haven't heard much of that. I imagine you're doing it, but I want to encourage the City of Bend to do that. And thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you for your comments, Mary. Before we move on to the next, it looks like we've got it up now, so apologies for that, tech issues. We do want you to be able to see the notes that we are taking as you provide comment, and so they should be on the screen. If at any time you see something that maybe doesn't reflect your own comment, then feel free to raise your hand again. The next person that I have here is Matthew, and forgive me for your last name, Krunglevich.
Hey, that wasn't too bad. Thank you for hearing my comments. It's Krunglevich. This was kind of a breath of fresh air to hear that we're not just moving forward with the Juniper Ridge subdivision or the Juniper Ridge establishment, but also looking elsewhere. The neighborhoods in Northeast, frankly, want you to stop. We do not want a homeless camp anywhere around in Northeast, even in gravel pits or anywhere you put them. We feel that the homeless people have, you moved them once because there was an issue. You're now having new issues, so you're moving them again, and then you're expecting to not have additional issues with that. We feel that the current policies and procedures that are in place, including the homeless camps along Roble Road or outside of Lowe's, those people are not being addressed and asked to leave. and they're just trespassing on the side of the street. Nobody's dealing with it. And it's hard for me to believe that if you put a homeless encampment at Juniper Ridge, that we'd have law enforcement being able to be tasked with a bunch of additional people that they're just not going to be able to do. We've had some successes at Veteran Village, which I saw was really great. That was a long time coming. I think a lot of strategy and work went into that. And then overall, we feel that the northeast area behind there is not addressed for the homeless population. It's way too close to schools and has too many problems. And it's also away from social services. And there's other alternatives that we'd like to see addressed. The first ones that come to mind are Discovery Park on the west side of Bend. That's an 18-acre park that you could utilize. It's ready to go with your emergency order. It has flushing toilets. It's closer to social services, and it's already graded and cited and has little impact as far as budget goes, which is one of your biggest concerns. Thanks for hearing my comments.
Thank you, Matthew. Up next, we have Joette Storm.
Discovery Park, that one over by the... Good evening. Thanks for doing this. It's important for us to know. As a longtime government employee myself, I knew the timeline you were facing was less than realistic, shall we say. I do have a question. Has BNSF given the city a deadline for solving the gate issue?
I'm not so sure if we're going to do back and forth Q&A, but BNSF is working with us to establish that timeline. We are currently procuring those swingable, lockable gates, and the progress that we've made to date, they're happy with it, and we'll continue to have conversations about when those gates are going to be lockable. At this point, they're pleased with our progress.
Okay, well, I'm fine. I think that looking at the broader picture is smarter. Doing a token move for 20 campers, as you have said in the past, leaves the other 55 camps in limbo. We really need to start looking now at the broader picture and finding a solution for all of the 1,000 people that we think are on the street. Appreciate the hard work that goes into this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joette. Next, we have Eric Garrity.
Hi there. So yeah, I wanted to speak out in support of the shelter because I think frankly, we're losing sight of what is the human cost and impact because we've already lost one person in the houseless community, David Savory. We already failed him once when he had both of his legs amputated, and then we failed again when he died from exposure on 3rd Avenue just a few weeks ago. Some shelters in the area are now unfortunately closed due to COVID concerns and lack of volunteers. So the need for a temporary shelter like this is actually urgent and higher than ever. And the real cost by asking City Council to oppose this, they're asking for this to, things like what happened to David Savory to happen again. We need to act now to prevent further loss of life. And I urge anyone who is worried about safety or concerned about attracting homeless folks. The houseless folks are already here, and the need for shelter and food is great. And so I would just urge anyone that is opposed to come down to Hunnell Road and just see for yourself. The houseless folks are here. We need to take care of our most vulnerable community members. And in the strongest sense, I urge City Council to act and approve the temporary shelter because the human cost has already been too high and we need to prevent further tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to go back to Lauren. Let's see if we got our audio working here. Lauren Johnson. Lauren, you're lit up. It looks like you're trying to talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for coming back to me. Hi, my name's Lauren Johnson. I live in the community of North Point, which is adjacent to Juniper Ridge. First of all, I'm encouraged by the update this evening, and I just kind of wanted to touch on the future development in Juniper Ridge. Last week, I attended the monthly NLA meeting where the Juniper Ridge Urban Renewal Manager, Matt Stewart, spoke. I was surprised by his presentation and the amount of interest he says that they've recently seen in their land for sale in Juniper Ridge. He stated that businesses are looking for light industrial, and the city just doesn't have a lot of land zoned light industrial available, end quote. As Bend continues to grow, the demand for business space will continue to grow as well. My question is, why are we not fully earmarking this area as a place for new business to move and for existing Bend businesses to expand into? We talk a lot about affordable housing. What about creating more jobs in Bend? Higher paying local jobs equate to residents being able to afford more. The city has promised for years that Juniper Ridge would be the next economic hub of Bend. Since 2005, residents within the Bend city limits have been paying a portion of their yearly property taxes to fund the Juniper Ridge urban renewal area. This tax is not set to expire until 2035. In addition to this, the residents rely on the city's comprehensive plan as guidance for what kinds of development will be where. Many residents in Northeast Bend, particularly those close to Juniper Ridge, purchased homes based on the plans and zoning that were already put in place by the city. So changes in the development to this land should be done so with the input of the public, which I've heard you will include moving forward. And then lastly, just want to add that I feel like smart city planning creates buffers between incompatible uses like homeless camps in schools or fire hazards and combustible manufacturing facilities.
Thank you, Lauren.
And Lauren asked two questions. I want to address them. So absolutely. So Matt and I work together. And so I'm glad that his presentation resonated with you, Lauren. I really appreciate that feedback. We know that we need land for employment use. What's happening, and you've probably seen it around you, is that we made an estimate that we would need so much employment land based on the number of employees we would need. And now what we're finding, just the industry mix that we have and just the way that businesses are studying their locations, we actually need less acreage to get the same amount of jobs that we expected, even when we did the comp plan back just 4 years ago. And so what we're looking at, and what will be a very public process, is if we can get the same number of jobs with fewer acres, then that would open up land to switch from employment land to residential. But we can't switch employment land to residential without a public process. So you very much would be involved and know that that's happening. You did say something about urban renewal, and I just want to be clear. It does show up on your property tax, but you are not paying it. It's what you would be paying for your house. The way the county shows it up on your bill, it looks like you're paying that urban renewal TIF, but sorry, you're not. Really, it's just the properties that are within the urban renewal area that pay that, and it goes into a fund so that we can use to build roads and other things that we need in Juniper Ridge to continue to attract that employment. So we are, man, if we have our foot on the accelerator around homelessness, the other foot is on an accelerator of a different car, I guess, around attracting businesses. And we have several land deals that we continue to negotiate to build out the development that you and your neighbors expect in Juniper Ridge, Lauren. So thanks for those questions. Thanks, Michaela.
Great. Next, we have James Buchanan.
Yes, thank you for the update. And my comments are going to have to be changed a little bit based upon that update. But anyway, some of them do remain relative. So basically, it would seem that the emergency order was being used as a means to bypass the land use code and land use processes that would normally be required under this circumstances. And they would include public notification and comment periods, code compliance review, and an opportunity for appeal. So in addition to this decision, potential decision lacking proper zoning and land use processes, the establishment of a camp in this location would be at odds with the adopted comprehensive plan for the city of Bend, requiring retention of the appropriate amounts of industrial and employment land reserves. As you described, Juniper Ridge has been in ownership of the city of Bend for about 3 decades, and the area that is zoned light industrial is about 500 acres, and that's in the southern portion there. And there has been many planning efforts and efforts to develop the critical infrastructure that is needed in this area. And it has resulted in the establishment of important large businesses and extensive community employment. Currently, there's 6 parcels that are under private business ownership, and they range from large corporations to important regional based businesses. And interest in land sales and development in light industrial lands is now gaining significant momentum, and that has resulted in recent sales there in Juniper Ridge. And
Shane, you've reached your 2-minute time frame.
So, okay, I'll just finish up. So it would be a shame to jeopardize this public-private investment in these industrial lands and to squander the decades of planning and infrastructure development. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. So up next, we have Andrew Sullivan.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Just wanted to introduce myself. As you said, my name's Andrew Sullivan. I've lived here in Bend for 6 years. I've got 5 kids, and we also live in the North Point neighborhood along with some of the other people that have made some comments. One of the things that me and my family appreciate most about Bend is how much they've invested into schools and parks. Our family is just so blessed to get to live in a city like this. Our kids walk and ride their bikes weekly to Lava Ridge Elementary School and to Rock Ridge Park. They love and enjoy those places. And the proposed camp and RV park, they will bring with them the crime and drug use that always accompanies homeless camps and RV parks. Just this morning, there was an arrest made at an RV park in south of Bend after a shooting there. And if there was a homeless camp next to these parks and these schools and these neighborhoods, they would be unsafe and unusable for my kids and for the kids of hundreds of families in the northeast of Bend. Now, I agree that we have a great need and a responsibility to those in our community who are experiencing homelessness. And we need to find an adequate location to move these campers away from the railroad and other combustible materials, like has been mentioned. But relocating them within a half mile of an elementary school, a middle school, 3 public parks, and the entire Boyd Acres neighborhood is not an acceptable solution. And it is a disheartening blow to the confidence that we used to have that our city officials had our best interests in mind. So I do want to thank you for the time that you've given me and the other participants here to speak. And we hope that you will take these statements and adjust course away from any temporary, phased, or permanent homeless shelters in Juniper Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Up next, we have Mike Satcher.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
So First, I'd like to start by challenging all of us to just change our language a little bit. And several times comments along the lines of, what do we do with homeless people? The phrase has been used. I'd like to challenge us to change that language from what do we do with houseless persons to what do we do for houseless persons, because these are human beings who deserve dignity and respect. And second, I'd like to respond to some of the not in my backyard style commenters expressing fear of people who are experiencing houselessness. Along with several of the people who I believe are now and will likely comment later, I personally visit these camps regularly to take food to people. And what I know from getting to know the residents of the camps is that they're good people, they're kind people, and they're people who just need some help. This last week, I worked alongside with residents of one of these camps who were happy and enthusiastic to keep things clean and sanitary in the camp. What maybe the not in my backyard folks don't understand is, as much as they don't like trash and things like that in the camps, neither do the campers. They want a clean living space as much as anyone does, and what they don't have are the resources to make it happen. So the folks are not a threat to the neighbors. They're living under the threat of living outside. The danger is not to the neighborhoods. The danger is to the people who are living the winter in these camps. Houseless people are human beings. What they need is our love. We can help them. We change our thinking from what to do with them to what do we do for them, and we can solve these problems. We just need a little more humanity in these questions. And I just encourage people to go out to the camps, take them some food, ask them their names, and get to know them.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, we have Stephen Eberhard. Stephen Eberhard, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, Stephen, we will come back to you and try it again in a bit. Next up, we have Lindsay Hellman.
Hi there. My name is Lindsay. I've been listening to the comments. Sorry, you'll probably hear my 9-month-old in the background playing with her toys. But I'd like to address the comments that other people have made about this being a not in my backyard issue. It has nothing to do with not in my backyard. It has everything to do with the fact that the city is wanting to put either an RV site or any kind of site for homeless individuals next to a highly flammable chemical plant that could have lit fire and blown up our entire neighborhood this summer, and 2 schools and several community parks. That's not an appropriate area. No matter what you do, there will always be crime in any neighborhood, especially with people who are in dire need. I agree that we need to help people. We need to figure out a solution for our homeless problem. But there are several other sites that are not next to a highly flammable chemical plant and across the street from schools and parks in the middle of neighborhoods. So with that, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Lindsay. We're going to go back to Stephen Eberhard. Stephen, you should be able to unmute yourself. And while we're waiting for Stephen, I do not see any other hands. And so I just want to make sure that everyone has the instructions for raising your hand. You can go to your participant screen at the bottom of your screen and click raise hand if you're viewing this on a desktop. If you're calling in with a telephone, you can push *9 to raise your hand. And you can also provide comment that way. I see a couple more hands came up. We're going to go to Tim Malone.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak. I don't disagree with pretty much anything anybody has said so far, including the city folks. I'm glad to see that they're taking both a short and a long view. My comments are mostly in, nobody has used the word or made reference to a large population of people, which I refer to as transients. And, they're the ones that kind of tag along with the homeless and use the homeless as a resource. They rip them off all the time and terrorize them. But those are the ones in that map with all the little campsites dotted on there. I've lived next door to that for 20 years. And those people use the neighborhoods as, to come in and steal and buy drugs because the car could come up the street and meet them there. And, we found, condoms and needles and things like that. People found them in our yards in the middle of the night. My kids grew up in the neighborhood there, couldn't let them go running around anywhere near Juniper Ridge, because of who lived there. It was the bad neighborhood, which surrounded us. So I think the city needs to get a grip here and start addressing the transients as a different group than the homeless with very different needs. They do need assertive law enforcement. If you're going to go forward with anything anywhere in the city, you're going to have to hire some more police officers because of the increasing number of transients. Currently they're advertising that Bend is a great place to come with a lot of free stuff, no police officers, do what you want, go where you want. We're attracting them. We got to address them as a separate group that has separate needs, or our homeless plans are going to be for naught. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Next, we have Ryan Knopp. Ryan Knopp, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I think I'm here now.
You are.
Okay. My wife and children and I live out on Deschutes Market Road. I've had several things stolen from my property. We frequently walk out in that Juniper Ridge area. And I'm sorry, Mike, they aren't clean. They don't take care of things. There's garbage everywhere. There's stripped down cars. There's crime. There's fires. There's major issues. I feel for the people that are homeless. I don't need them in my backyard unless it's being policed and taken care of. You can't police out there. I spent several hours walking out there. There's no way for the police or anybody to get in there and protect the property, and for fire personnel to get in and keep fires from starting. It's not a good place for homeless people to be. I get they're putting the pipeline through right now. It's going right next to my property. And yes, there's a lot of rock, and it's maybe what the city thinks is a good place for a proper spot to put people, but that is not a proper place to put homeless. And there should be more care put into what we do with the homeless people of Bend.
Thank you, Ryan. Up next, we have Charles Hemingway.
I support the city's plans to place an organized camp at Juniper Ridge. The reality is that no matter what the city does, there are going to be homeless people who are going to be remaining in Juniper Ridge. Currently, there are those experiencing homelessness living in spread out locations at Juniper Ridge, throughout Juniper Ridge. If we can get them centralized in an organized location, that's going to better enable the provision of services that would then lead to perhaps them getting out of homelessness and into their own place to live. At present, there are many widespread routes that these individuals use on foot that go through the neighborhoods and yards of those who live in the Juniper Ridge locales. But having a centralized camp will provide possibilities for coordinated transportation and help make Cooley Road leading to Highway 97, the prime route, without the current situation of campers coming in from everywhere throughout Juniper Ridge to get to Cooley Road and Highway 97. An organized camp, I believe, will also cut down on incidents of crime and vandalism and allow a more effective management and delivery of case services. So thanks to the city for this project.
Thank you, Charles. Up next, we have Brian Burglar.
Hey, good evening. I want to first of all just say thank you, Carolyn and John, for all of your work and for the approach. I think thank you to some of the prior speakers. Lauren, you're very articulate. Appreciate that very much. As we move forward, the community looks forward to working with you in this process. I think the challenge continues to be, how do we remain compassionate and help our community members in need and address it in an appropriate way? Homelessness is not an issue for Northeast Bend. Homelessness is certainly an issue for all of Bend. And as we've seen, it's all an issue throughout our state as well as others across the US. So thank you for your work there. I would continue to encourage your work with Juniper Ridge for its intended purpose. We need to address the ongoing needs for industrial and residential land, and the status that we can continue to move forward there, as well as with the urban growth boundary process that has challenged our housing for a number of years, both from affordability and for resources available. So again, thank you very much for your work and for your time this evening.
Thank you, Brian. Abby Davidson.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. I am a resident of the North Point development, and our property actually backs up to Juniper Ridge. We have young children who attend the schools right there off of Cooley Road. Since living here, I've had numerous incidents where I've had to call police. We've had abandoned vehicles with flat tires. We've had people living out of vehicles. And our property is also right next to where the new park is slated to begin construction. So we have numerous concerns. I've had vehicles driving behind my property to get to the Juniper Ridge area. We've seen people of all types. We've had things stolen from the back. We just worry about the safety of our kids with the location of the new park backing up to then what would be another entrance to the Juniper Ridge homeless camp area. We have the two schools right off Cooley Road where so many of our students bike and walk to because we're all within such close proximity to the school. Our children don't have a choice for transportation. So there are a lot of incidences where we can look to the fact that the homeless put in the Juniper Ridge area do not connect them to services to the extent that they need. Setting up tents or even RV spots with future opportunity for needs is not helping people get back on their feet. It's just putting them out of sight. It's a really good spot for our tours to not have to see our homeless population, which seems to be kind of another part of this, is to just tuck it away where nobody can see except for the people who are affected daily. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. And next we have Britta Olson.
I want to support what Bend is trying to do to provide help for this emergency that is happening. I have been out to the camps multiple times, and they are people, they are good people looking for solutions. And if we can help them, that would be wonderful. I think Charles was brilliant in what he said on all of this. Also, question, we're meeting on Zoom and through phones, but has anyone gone out there to invite them to be part of this process at all? I mean, we're talking about these people kind of, it feels like behind their backs. And I think that they would probably have some good input and insight to this as well. But I don't know if they would have access to Zoom or to a phone to be able to call in to give that insight. So something to think about in the future. That's it.
So to that point, we have reached out to a number of the social service providers, and and Carolyn might have more detail, but I know that a number of them were hosting listening sessions where campers could attend this remotely. So yeah, the access issue is definitely a challenge.
Go ahead, Jaime.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Brita, for that question. I was out there yesterday passing out copies of press release and talking to people about today's listening session and tomorrow's. So I wasn't able to make contact with everyone out there, but there was a good number of them that do know. And they have a very good communication system within Juniper Ridge. So they do talk, they do communicate. So I'm hopeful that the information that I made available to them was shared with everyone else. So again, thank you, Rita, for the question.
I think, and just to add on, Britta, you bring up a really great point as we think about locations for establishing camps, and as we think about the management of camps, really having those who will choose to be a guest or to reside at the camp being front and center of establishing the rules for staying in that location. So you're really starting us, sort of challenging us to really put our money where our mouth is in planning with the community members who will be living at these locations. So thanks for bringing that up.
Next we have Andy Kizans.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can.
All right. It sounds like the new city council is going to play a pretty strong role in determining some of the next steps. So I'm curious, are any of them on this call or will be on tomorrow's call? And how do they get a readout from this? Because I think there's been some really strong commentary about why Juniper Ridge is an unsuitable location for this. And I certainly hope that it gets communicated to them, because I feel like, I don't know, it's just my impression that some of the speakers already are predisposed to that site for whatever reason. And they're not open-minded to looking at other sites. And I hope that is not what's communicated to the city council, but that they hear the exact comments from everyone on here, pro and con.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Campbell.
I'm listening.
You might want to say that again.
I am here and I am listening. I thank everyone for their comments. I am delighted that they are being written down so we can go back and review them, because it is a lot of information, even for those of us that are able to be on the call. So thank you to everybody that's commenting today, and thank you to staff for setting this up. It's working really well today.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Lindsay Hellman, I see your hand has returned, and we do not have anybody else at this time to make a comment. And so I'm going to open it up to you.
I don't necessarily have an actual comment. I was reading the notes and just wanted to make sure that it said highly flammable chemical plant on my comment. And I also noticed that under Brian's comment that it wasn't specified that he was encouraging the work with Juniper Ridge to be encouraging for the light industrial and not for this purpose. As the comment reads currently, it looks like he's encouraging for it to be used as the purpose that we're discussing on this phone call. So those were my only comments.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Lorana Kroll. Lorana, you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for having this meeting. I live in the Northeast Bend area in the Yardley Estates, and my children will go to those two schools. And that's just my biggest concern is, our kids walking to and from school, and the people in these in the homeless camp walking to and from where they have to go, just kind of the paths crossing, that just makes me super nervous. And quite honestly, I don't think I would feel comfortable sending my kids to these schools if this were to happen. So I would be looking to move school districts. I don't know how that whole process works. My kids aren't even in school yet, but it's just a big concern of mine. And same thing with the parks. I want my kids to be able to ride their bikes to the park, and it just concerns me, the traffic and the type of people that it could attract. It concerns me, and I know we do have a problem with homelessness, and we do need to find some good solutions, but this just does not seem like a good location. Thank you.
Thank you. John Riggs.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. So homelessness obviously is not a new thing, even on a global scale. It is what it is. And I can't not acknowledge that people would be worried about their families and so on and so forth. But in reality, just moving around homeless camps, houseless, it's not gonna change anything. Sorry, this is a new thing for me. But so I have a friend. A close friend of mine. 3 years ago, he had a schizophrenic break, and he now lives on the streets. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who his family is, and he refuses to get any kind of help. And so I constantly think of him when I put all this into perspective. And I think Charles nailed it on the head, that the best way that we can address this is by addressing the entire situation. And there are so many factors. You know, a lot of people mention more police. More police is actually a negative in this realm. When my friend is confronted by a police officer because he doesn't have the mentality to go get a job, so he steals a candy bar so he can eat. When he's confronted by a police officer, it's always bad. So we need to construct different jobs, so on and so forth. Mental health counselors, people who can go into the realm of houselessness and help those people in that way. And so instead of being under the idea that we just need to not have them around us, that needs to change into how can we fix the situation as a whole. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Caller ending in 2777. You should now be able to talk. Please identify yourself if you don't mind, just so we get your name.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
You can.
My name is Andrew. I live in Northeast Bend as well. And I just like to just bring up the fact that I bought a home on the east side, and it feels like, how do I want to say this? That the east side isn't as equally represented as the west side of town. And, there's a lot of homeless facilities on the east side. We have an industrial area that's going to be built, kind of mixed use. There's a lot of low income housing being put in. And I just like to encourage the city staffers to play some defense for the east side and look at putting homeless shelters on the west side of town as well, and distribute the facilities across the city evenly and not just disproportionately on the east side. So I just like to bring that up. That's just something that I find when I have east side versus west side. There's an equal representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's see, we have about 8 minutes left. I see at least one person we haven't heard from, and so we'll start there before I give it to Carolyn and John to wrap it up. Marion Crafts, you are next.
Can you hear me correctly?
You're very quiet.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, enough.
Okay, all I wanted to say is that everyone seems to be missing the point. These people are already there. Okay, it's just a matter of relocating them from sparse locations out in the areas to one location. They're already there. They already use the streets. They do everything else. So not putting a camp there is not going to remove what you've already got. I know I go out there every week. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Bev Vasquez. Bev, if you're speaking, you are muted.
Can you hear us now?
We can.
Okay, thank you. This is Derek Stevens. Actually, I took the phone over from her. One of the things that I wanted to add to this is we're looking in the next three weeks, really, of 30 to 40 million Americans becoming unhoused. The idea that, oh, this is going to be horrible in my backyard, this is going to be this, it's going to, we're worried about kids going to school. This is going to be everywhere. The city has an opportunity at this point to stand up and put in dumpsters, to put in some porta toilets, and actually recognize that this is something that is happening and will continue to happen in this nation for a long time. And we can either get in front of it and deal with it with the city-owned property that is sitting fallow, or we can start looking at the need for leasing the KOA campground at a cost which doesn't make any sense given the fact that Juniper Ridge exists and is not doing anything. This is time to stand up and do what need be done for a city that has no place for the poor, has no place for the working, and has no place for the unhoused. It is time for the city to do something that actually makes sense for those who are not represented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And with that, we're at our time for questions and comments. If you did not have a chance to speak to us tonight, or if you have a follow-up, we are going to put some contact information on the screen for you. Feel free to utilize that. And with that, I'll turn it back to John and Carolyn.
Great. And one other item, we will have a similar discussion tomorrow during the noon hour from noon to 1:30 for those who may not have had an opportunity to speak or want to gather their thoughts and address us tomorrow. So we will hold that listening session tomorrow, and then tomorrow evening we will speak with council, provide them a briefing on this and really the results of our feasibility analysis. And as we seat the new council in the new year and develop goals for that council, my guess is that this issue will be involved in those goals in some form or fashion. Exactly how that works out remains to be determined, but the recommendation of council or of staff to council is to continue on the path towards amending the code to find broader range of solutions for those that are housing challenged and experiencing homelessness. So a lot more to come on this and a lot more opportunities for the community to become involved. Carolyn, do you have any wrap-up comments?
I wanted to thank everyone. All of the comments that we heard really just highlight all of the interests that we need to balance as city staff and as a community, from the comments around tourism to schools to safe ways to get to schools, all the way to the last gentleman's comments about this is an issue we need to get in front of today, and we're probably already too late. So thank you, all of you, for giving 90 minutes plus of your time tonight. We really appreciate it, and this is a community conversation that will continue. So thank you for participating in it now, and we just invite you to continue to participate. Thanks so much.
Stay tuned. Thanks.